Welcome to Pure Nonfiction, the podcast interviewing documentary filmmakers. I'm Tom Powers, the documentary programmer for the Toronto International Film Festival and artistic director of Doc NYC. On this episode, I talked to filmmakers Steven Bognar and Julia Reichert. Their latest film, American Factory, is an Oscar nominee for Best Documentary. It's set in their hometown of Dayton, Ohio, at a former GM auto plant that closed down several years ago. In American Factory, we witness new hope arrive when the Chinese glass company Fuyao reopens the plant and creates new employment. Steven and Julia filmed over 2 years as the first wave of hope turns complicated. We watch a culture clash play out between the Chinese management and the American workers. The whole premise is head-spinning for Americans. We're more accustomed to our companies going to China for cheap labor. So what does it mean when China comes to the U.S. to impose its systems here? Steven and Julia worked with Chinese collaborators that enabled them to get close to characters on all sides of the story. We watch workplace tensions grow over an effort to unionize the plant. We talk a lot in this interview about getting access.
I mean, it's one thing to get access, and it's another thing to gain trust.
Julia came from a working-class family in New Jersey. Coming of age in the 1960s, she was galvanized by the women's liberation movement. She went to college in Ohio, where she made her first documentary in 1971 called Growing Up Female. That was followed by her films Union Maids and Seeing Red, that explored hidden chapters of revolutionary politics. Steven met Julia in Ohio as his film career was beginning in the 1990s. They became a couple, but made films individually. Then they teamed up for an epic project called A Lion in the House that followed the families of children with cancer as they undergo treatment over several years. It was released in 2006 and won a Primetime Emmy. Their next film was a short called The Last Truck, Closing of a GM Plant, that was Oscar-nominated in 2009. It documents the closing of the very same plant that they returned to in American Factory. To get this project going, they had to spend months working on their own dime before they gained funding from Participant Media. The film premiered at the 2019 Sundance Film Festival, where it was acquired by Netflix in partnership with Barack and Michelle Obama's company, Higher Ground. I sat down with Steven and Julia last August. Looming in the background were two events from the prior week that come up in our conversation. One is the passing of documentary pioneer D.A. Pennebaker. The other is a mass shooting in Dayton, Ohio, that occurred a few days earlier on a Saturday night outside a bar. The gunman killed 9 people and wounded 17 in a mere 32 seconds before he was shot by a police officer. Our conversation took place at the School of Visual Arts in the MFA program for social documentary. I asked Julia and Steven how the project of American Factory got started.
Well, it's good you brought up The Last Truck, because that is how it came about. The Last Truck is filmed in our own hometown, Dayton, Ohio.
We had made this earlier film, and when Fuyao came to town, that factory had been empty for like 6-7 years. There was a ton of excitement when Fuyao arrived. And pretty quickly someone said, what's going to happen here is historic. They're going to bring a dead, huge factory back to life. And people started talking about, like, let's document it. And then someone in town said, well, there's these 2 filmmakers already there. Why don't we ask them? We were approached by the community helping the company come to town. And we said, yeah, it sounds good, but we will do it as a film if it's an independent film. If we own it, we have editorial control. We don't take any money from the company, but the company really would have to trust us and give us access. And it was like not a few weeks of discussion going back and forth, but pretty soon the chairman, who's the real decision maker there, said, let's do it.
This is the Chinese billionaire who owns Fuyao.
Yes, Chairman Chao Dewang, who started the company in the 1980s in China and is now like a worldwide multi-billionaire global entrepreneur.
So did you have to have a meeting with him to finalize the deal?
We didn't actually have a meeting with him. We had a meeting with, like, the vice president. I think we had a meeting with Rebecca, the main lawyer.
Right.
But no, we met him pretty early on. I mean, the plant was still way being built when we first
Yeah.
filmed him. It was in like just a little room, and there was construction all around.
We started filming February or March of 2015, and then he first came to town, I think in May of
gonna say May or
2015,
June,
and we did our
yeah.
first sit-down interview with him then, the first of like something like 7 or 8 sit-down interviews, and we filmed him, walking through the factory. There's a couple scenes. There's a scene in the film where Rebecca's on a bullhorn, and the chairman's talking to like a sort of a semicircle of American workers, and he's saying like, "We're going to do this," kind of a rallying speech. Like that was one of his first days in the plant when he first came, and that's one of the first times we filmed with him, for example. So we started to get to know him and this world early on, but we didn't know what the story was or where it was going.
We did know, I will say, we did know because of the last truck. We knew the stakes for the American blue-collar workers. We knew the stakes because we knew what it had meant to them because of the last truck. We knew what it meant to have a secure job with respect, with good benefits, where you can plan your future, where you can have a vacation, where your kid could go to college. And we knew what it was like to lose that job and have the floor fall out from under you and be devastated and just feel beaten down for years. Some people, like we followed, this brought us back to our community in a big way. And we kept following people in different ways with radio and photography and so forth. People living in their cars, people earning $8 an hour with no benefits at all. I mean, I'm talking about families,
People losing their homes.
Yeah, like really it was frightening what went on. So when the plant reopened, that sense of hope and optimism and that we're going to pull together and we're going to do this. It's a startup, the wages are not good, the job is hard, but we're going to do it. And we're going to learn about the Chinese folks, we're going to learn their culture. That was such a sense of optimism that started out. And I think we understood that more, and our hearts were really with the blue-collar workers because we understood the stakes. We came to understand better when you say the stakes for the Chinese workers who came, who had mostly been working at Fuyao for a long time. They were long-term experienced workers, mostly.
And how many came over?
About 300 at any one time, although people came over in waves. Sometimes you'd see 10 or 12 people coming over at once. And let's not forget, they came from a small city in China, got on a plane knowing no English, knowing nothing about America than like Reservoir Dogs and Breaking Bad on the TV, right? That's what they knew. Or, that kind of thing. And then they get off the airplane in Dayton, Ohio. Not a big city like New York where you'd find lots of Chinese restaurants and Chinese culture and Chinese people, but Dayton, Ohio. And they have to make a life here. What were the stakes for them? Like, they were separate from their families for a year, 2 years. They had to make that plant build up, sing, make profit. They were going to sacrifice almost anything of their lives to make that plant work, to make that endeavor succeed. And the chairman, they were very loyal to the chairman because he had given them a good job for like 10, 20 years. Someone like Wang had worked there. He was very loyal to the company. He may have never even met the chairman at all, but he was very loyal.
The loyalty we felt between someone like the factory furnace engineer Wang and the company reminded us a lot of like in the 50s in America when you might have someone who works for GM or Ford or General Electric, the fierce loyalty they felt to the company, and they felt that the company felt loyalty to them. Whatever, you can call it like a social contract or something. And we really feel like that's broken now, that there's no loyalty between company and workers now, and kind of almost anywhere in the U.S. But we really felt that in China with companies like Fuyao.
The stakes were high. The stakes were also high. It's funny we never talk about it this way, but the stakes were also high for the management, the American management who were brought in to like bring back as many as 2,000 to 2,500 jobs to this devastated community and somehow make it work. It was very difficult. The cultural differences were really great in management style, in how they trained the workers for this, the American workers for this whole new type of job. Huge, huge differences. Even them understanding our laws. They did not understand our laws and our way of treating the environment, treating workers, and so forth. So for management, that balancing act was really hard. For the chairman, it was really hard.
And in many ways, this was a new territory for us as filmmakers. We've sort of picked a community and told a story from one point of view, the workers in the factory who are losing their jobs. In this film, we started realizing this is going to have multiple points of view, and we're going to try to craft something that immerses you and gives you empathy for people who maybe don't even agree with other people in the film for whom we also hope you'll have empathy. And that we're going to build this large kind of structure where you'll be upstairs on the Chinese side or downstairs on the American side or vice versa, and you'll care about multiple people, even though they don't know each other or maybe even they're getting on each other's nerves.
And a lot of times, actually, it was a little bit like A Lion in the House in that way, where we talked to the kids and their moms and dads, but we also had access to the doctors and their meetings, the nurses and their meetings.
Difference is they weren't necessarily
Opposed.
adversarial in the way that unionized workers are to the management. And what's so extraordinary about American Factory is its ability to tell the story from multiple perspectives and the candor that you capture, even candor from, upper management who ought to have had some media training, or there's one moment where upper middle manager is upset with something that Senator Sherrod Brown has said at a rally. Sherrod Brown has made mention of the union, which they were not expecting him to say at this factory rally. And this manager says to someone else, I'd like to take a scissors and cut his head off, which, we've all said things that we don't literally mean like that. And I think the film does a good job of making him seem human in that moment. But that was a moment that struck me as wow, I can't believe he said that in front of the camera.
Well, that's the thing. We were always there. We were like the wallpaper. I mean, there was one person, it was Aubrey Keith,
cinematographer.
young cinematographer, who that particular day we each had a character we were going to follow, right? I forget who I followed that day. Anyway, Aubrey followed him, and she was just there at his shoulder all the time, and he just pretty much forgot about her.
But by that point, first of all, we've been filming Dave for months, and that day, Aubrey had been following Dave probably for 4 hours before that moment happened. So he's wearing a lavalier mic, and he's on camera for 4 hours. And, it's just at some point, you just got to live your life and not be so self-conscious about the camera.
So as time went on and other tensions started to rise in the factory, did you get pushback from any of the people you were following about or questions about what story you're telling?
Yeah, we sure did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as the union sort of battle flared, some people started wondering, are we company spies? Are we we were trying to film union meetings, and they see us with management, and they think, oh, well, are you informing management of what we're talking about? And then management wondered, are we union spies? So we learned we had to learn to not affect the course of events. Documentarians should not change what happens. I mean, unless it's a personal doc, perhaps, like Best Boy, perhaps, classic doc from the 70s. But we did not want to impact what was happening, and so we had to really learn to be careful to not sort of reveal things we knew. We knew a lot of stuff that the management didn't know about workers, and the people on the floor did not know about management.
I always say we feel like we're like in the crow's nest. Where you can see the ocean all around, you can see what everybody's doing, but you don't. We didn't speak to people about it. Yeah, we knew a lot of stuff. I always say it's one, but somehow we navigated that. I mean, it's one thing to get access, and it's another thing to gain trust. just getting access wouldn't get us that close to people. And I think it had to do with that we were truly curious about what all the difficulties everybody faced. This was a huge endeavor. It was a never before done thing, certainly in Dayton, Ohio, and pretty much even in the U.S. probably, creating something like that. And I think it was just that empathy we actually had. It wasn't fake, And after a while, even people who maybe in other parts of my life I might have felt they're the enemy. I'm on the other side of the barricades from them. I did not feel that way after a while. I felt like they are really struggling to do the best they can do. There were no bad guys. I didn't feel there were any bad guys.
And we also told people, look, we will treat you fairly. In the editing, we will not demonize you. And we worked hard in the editing to not have like simple black and white, you're bad, you're good. It's not that the chairman, you could say, oh, he's a ruthless capitalist who wants profits. But he brought back 2,000 jobs where people needed it, and he has self-reflection himself. He wonders, am I harming the environment? Am I doing the right thing? Am I more contributing or not? He's got this ruminative side to him that's not black or white.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a little bit, I want to ask you about the experience of sharing the film with people, but let me ask you a couple other questions. As storytellers in Ohio, I wonder what you think other media might miss about Ohio or telling stories about Ohio.
That's a great question.
I think sometimes people miss the creative lives that, let's say, working class people have outside of the factory. I think people would tend to come to Ohio and see people in some kind of crisis. But that's not their whole life. There's a whole life beyond the hard spot they're in. Everybody in our film, and I wish we could have shown more, you see it more in The Last Truck, where we spent a little more time with that. But people are musicians, people are crafters, painters, people make stuff. People are way gardeners and love it, like Mark, So I think people sometimes miss that. People sort of pigeonhole. I mean, amongst your friends, we all know the people close to us. We know there's multiple parts of us. But I don't think you capture that, and most media, let's face it, comes out of New York, L.A., and maybe
they
don't
spend
have
a day or a week at most.
and maybe didn't come from that kind of background or don't have parents or grandparents who lived there. I don't know.
And the nuance of different people's, it's easy to look at someone and say, pigeonhole them and say, oh, that's the gun-toting, Harley-Davidson riding, Trump-supporting, blue-collar white guy, right? But that blue-collar white guy also, his best friend is an African-American man in the factory, and they're very tight. And he's, he might have voted for Trump, but he also might have voted for Obama. He's got complexity to him.
And he has horses. He lives on a farm, and he really befriended Wang. I mean, you were talking about Rob specifically.
He really gives his heart over to these Chinese guys who he sees working their hearts out. There's more new. It's true for anything. You have to spend time with people to feel the layers and the ridges and the grain of their lives.
Well, part of that grain that comes through in the film is humor. There are aspects of the story that are very serious, even tragic, but you are alert throughout to moments of humor. I think of a scene where workers have taken pains to put up signage, like letter by letter, above a factory door, and when it's all done, they realize there's a grammatical mistake to it, and it comes across in the film not as like a joke on them. Oh, look, they made this grammatical mistake. It's more a kind of human thing that. We all put work into something, and then it's, through our own human foibles, it doesn't always come out the way we expect.
We never wanted to cross a line into mean humor, but we felt like both the Americans and the Chinese, there's fair game for a little gentle poking of fun. Humor loosens us up, right? We watch movies, We've all seen many Ernest documentaries that have no humor and no release, that emotional, whatever, physical release. And we just feel like if there's the possibility of humor and it's not unfair, why not? Documentaries should have more humor.
You know, there's another thing. I'm proud of the fact that, to me, there's no gotcha moments in the movie. There's no moments when a person said something you shouldn't have said and we just kind of gotcha. All the things that are said, even those that are difficult to hear, were said again and again and again. I think this, we always say as documentarians that we're trying to talk about the human condition, right? Which I truly, deeply believe in. You're trying to talk about what it means to be human in a particular time in a particular place. And I actually think Lion and this film really achieved that. We really kind of cut through the story and the immediate crisis to, like, what does it mean to be human when you're a doctor in a cancer ward, or when you're a manager in a really tough situation, or you're a worker or you're an owner? What does it mean to be human? And in this world of globalization, where cultures are definitely coming together, where workers' wages are being pushed down, what does it mean to all of us that to be a worker? What is that human condition, to be a factory worker right now? I'm not saying this very well, but I think, I've never thought about this. We really are trying to achieve an answer to that question in this time and this place.
And through observational cinema.
Yeah, right, which is what we do, right.
We're talking to you, Tom, a couple of days after D.A. Pennebaker died, and we've been talking about his legacy and what his films mean to us. And it's just that the power of that immersive cinema, of just how much you can get from, not from words on a screen, not from narration, not from exposition, but just the visual observation of people interacting, the sort of shaggy dog poetry of everyday life. It's like, we love that. And I feel like Penny and Penny and Chris's films, they found those veins again and again. And that's something we're always striving for.
Penny was like, we loved him. I mean, when we listened to him, he's a great raconteur, as I'm sure you know, and would ramble all over the place. But he was 94, but he always approached life and talking and shooting as like a little boy. It's like
he always said that he felt like the youngest person in the room.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And always had that kind of outlook, too.
Yeah, like he was very, like he said, I'm like a cat. I get in there and I just look around and see what's interesting. And you try to bring that, even to these serious situations, that sense of like youthful innocence and just like what's really just going on here. And we all got that from Penny.
A big portion of the story is a Chinese story, and I know that you worked with Chinese crew members, including some former students of mine from here at the School of Visual Arts, where we're talking. Can you talk about the importance of having Chinese field producers as part of the team?
It was utterly, utterly crucial to making that film happen. They came out, and first of all, immediately, the Chinese workers who really couldn't talk to us and did not want to be on camera immediately started talking to them, right?
And we're comfortable being on camera.
Yeah.
Lulu Min, Xian Liu, Danny Wang, they were the first three who came out. And then pretty soon we met the two women who became our co-producers, Yichen Zhang and Mijia Li. We met Mijia through the folks who made Last Train Home, Ice Steel Films up in Montreal. Mm-hmm. And then Yichen approached us at IDFA. We had just done this pitch we were trying to raise money at that point. We did a pitch at IDFA, and Yichen heard the pitch and came up to us and said, "Look, I'm a producer from China.
I want to work with you.
I live in
Right, yeah.
Toronto now, and I want to work on this film." And we're like, "Well, okay, let's sit down and talk." But within 45 minutes, we had plans for her to come to Ohio, and once Mijia and Yichen were fully on board, one or both of them were in Ohio every month, and that was crucial to the film expanding and its consciousness expanding.
Well, and it was partly that they could talk to the Chinese workers, and particularly Yichen and Mijia really established relationships. Like, we already knew Wang, but we couldn't really talk with him. We already knew Lian, but his English was still marginal. But they really established relationships, going to dinner at their house. So they did that. But I feel like the other thing, especially Yichen did, is educate us talk to us long into the night about, because they were born and raised in China. They had only recently come to the U.S. Mijia still lives in China, so that we could say, well, we could ask them, like, what is this New Year's celebration thing all about? And what about the style of eating? And what about the way women are treated in China? And when did you have access to books? And what's the education system like? These workers, these blue-collar workers, did they go to college? Did they go to high school? The management people, we didn't understand China. They of course, are Chinese and lived there. Yeah. So they educate. I feel like that was a huge contribution. Yichen told us books to read, which I would then read. So helpful to us.
The process of unionization is so important in this film. When the factory opens, it's an ununionized factory, and then that becomes a real issue. We also see the contrast in expectations between American workers who come from union backgrounds when it used to be a GM plant compared to the Chinese workers who have never had that system before. I wonder what the experience of making this film and then even taking it out and showing it around has taught you about the state of unions in America.
Well, making the film certainly showed us that, with the globalization that's happening, the global economy putting more pressure on everybody to be productive, to work harder, and yet make less, with the efforts to stop unions happening through the use of these consulting companies like the one you see in the film, working people are in a harder spot than they've been in generations, especially in the U.S. We had a middle class 30, 40, 50 years ago, and it was largely due to good jobs with good wages that were mostly fought for by unions, and a lot of that's gone. So we see, it's interesting. In China, there's a growing labor movement. It's hard to read about, but there have been strikes throughout many factories in China, and wages have gone up in China. We've heard repeatedly because of this, but it's hard for us to hear about that. In the U.S., there's been a concerted effort to undermine union membership, these consulting companies, in a sort of a major multi-year campaign to say unions, we don't need them anymore. Yeah, they served a purpose 100 years ago, but now we don't need them, and that's led to a lot of loss of agency for working people.
Yeah, I wanted to just also add, Tom, that something we filmed, which I don't think has ever been filmed, and it was really revelatory to us, is the influence of these union avoidance companies. This one was called Labor Relations Institute. It's a big one, but there's hundreds of them. Companies who are highly skilled, highly trained in our universities and our law schools to fight unions, to avoid unions. And it's one thing to have a point of view, you don't want a union, okay, and you talk to workers about why you don't want a union. It's another thing to fire workers and discipline workers because they are clearly pro-union. It's another thing to intimidate and coerce people, which they do. It's not just in Chinese factories, by the way. It's almost any American factory or big workplace would try to hire a company to avoid unions. These folks have a really clear playbook. It hasn't changed that much since the 70s. And to my mind, in that factory, it was not a fair election. It was not a fair election. In other words, we all believe in fair elections. We all believe you shouldn't be coerced. You shouldn't be. But lots of people were targeted and then fired for their union activity. We found it out more later after the film was finished being shot, but you see enough of it in the film. Like Jill was definitely targeted, and later actually the company, she filed an unfair labor practice and the company settled with her.
But the ironies abound, because then we went to China and everyone's in a union, and this communist country are basically the best capitalists in the world at the moment. And why are the fiercest union fighters in the United States, folks who are, some of them who are members of the Communist Party. It's a really fascinating set of like contradictions and complexity.
But it's also the world we live in now.
Yeah.
That's
And,
what we're trying to present to you.
We
I
hope
think,
the
right?
film will leave people grappling with the, like, is this it? Is this the future? We're all under more pressure. We're all, are we all going to be working 9 to 9, 6 days a week? Is this the fate of working people? Is this sustainable? We hope this film sparks these kind of conversations about the sustainability of this. What direction is it going? Are American workers going to be working like they do in China, or will the Chinese workforce say, you know what? I don't like working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. That actually, let's change this. What's going to happen? We want to spark that.
So let me ask you about the experience of sharing the film with the people who are in it.
Well, we were nervous doing that, to say the least.
You mean with the management?
Well, yeah, we took it. Well, we took it. So the main people who have speaking roles in the film and who still work there, they've all seen the film, whether they're like Bobby or Wong or
Timmy, Jill, yeah.
And that includes the management. We showed the film to the senior leadership in Ohio, the president Jeff Liu and some of the top folks back in November, and then again right before Sundance. When it was locked and done, and they were very gracious about it. They saw that there were things that they didn't like or that made them uncomfortable, but they also said, like, we learned a lot from watching this film, and it was a rough few years, but we want they actually said to us, we want our senior leadership to see this film. And then the chairman saw it not that long ago, like a month or 6 weeks ago. And he also, again, he didn't like love everything in the film, but I think he said,
You weren't in the room when he was watching.
No, I was sitting next to him, and we subtitled a version of the film so he could read it, because then he doesn't have to have someone kind of trying to keep up with all the English. But he was very generous and gracious about it as well, and so far they've been really good about it. That they see it as a record of a hard few years. Did everything go well? Did they make any mistakes? They grapple with all that. But so far it's been good.
And we're having just in two weeks from yesterday, August 19th, we're having, Netflix is doing, which I think is really cool, the sort of big premiere in Dayton. Mm-hmm. They said usually they were like, oh, really? We're going to do it in Dayton? Usually they do it in New York, a bigger media market, I guess is what they say, right? New York or LA or whatever. We said, no, we should do it in Dayton. And so we are. And there's going to be a lot of Fuyao workers, past and present there. So that'll be really interesting.
Chinese and American.
Yeah, Chinese and American, and of course, community members. And
well, and Dayton, as you know from the news, is reeling from a mass shooting that we just had. And we hope the premiere will be a moment of coming together to, to just be together downtown Dayton and a few blocks from that. It's weird to be in New York right now because all our friends and family are dealing with this tragedy. And it's just like a small town there. It's like our immediate friends and family were not hurt or injured, but like we know people who were. And so it's tough to be away from home right now.
As this film goes up on Netflix and reaches millions of people around the world, is there something that you're kind of looking forward to or, hoping?
Well, I'm very much hoping that people will notice the lack of voice that workers have, whether they're in China or America, and then by extension anywhere around the world. When I say workers, I mean working people, which is most of us, have actually very little voice in what happens at our workplace. And we should have more voice. We should have more of a voice at the table. And there's actually repression of that voice that goes on. So I'm hoping that whether it's worker activists or the union movement can take the film and use it to help people become more aware of that and maybe make some change, whether it's through who you elect or what you do at your workplace, that you feel more courage, you realize. So I hope, that's something that I personally, as a person who comes out of a working class background and has made films about unions and working people, I personally really hope that it helps make some change.
I hope the film helps depolarize conversations. It's so hard these days to talk about any kind of hot button issue and not go to the barricades, and be concerned that, Uncle Bill or Aunt Sue will just freak out because they don't agree with you. And we tried to make a nuanced film, a film that thoughtfully raises questions about the future of working people and labor and work. And we hope that I hope the film just creates a space where people can really have complex, thoughtful conversations with people they don't agree with.
That you realize that even people who you don't agree with or on the other side of the barricades are human beings with real lives and reasons they do what they do. I think you see that in our film, right? It is a very, very divided and polarized country we live in right now. And hopefully this will be a little antidote to that.
I want to thank Steven Bognar and Julia Reichert for speaking with me. Their film, American Factory, is now playing on Netflix and is Oscar nominated in the category of Best Documentary Feature. If you're in New York City, I invite you to attend the Pure Nonfiction screening series at IFC Center. Every Tuesday night, we show a documentary, followed by a conversation with the filmmakers. The winter season starts on February 11th with Barbara Koppel's new film, Desert One. For more information, go to ifccenter.com. Thanks to our team, series producer Hannah Nordenswan and web designer Cross Strategy. Our theme music is composed by Andre Williams, and our executive producer is Rafaela Nehausen. I'm Tom Powers. You can follow me on Twitter at THOMPowers. Pure Nonfiction is distributed by the TIFF Podcast Network. You can read our show notes, learn about live events, and sign up for our newsletter at purenonfiction.net.